Alela, Artful, Provocateur is 1 white, blue, black for a 2/3. Other creatures you control with flying get +1/+0. And the big one, whenever we cast an artifact or enchantment spell, we get a 1/1 fairy with flying. That Alela will turn into a 2/1. Oh yeah, and this thing has flying, death touch, and lifelink. I pushed it! The main idea of the deck is not only to go wide by flooding the board with artifacts and enchantments and tokens, but it's also to go tall by throwing some buffs on our 2/3 flying lifelink death touch commander. This thing gets scary as hell with a black blade on it. Let's get into the basics of the deck. For mana ramp, we're looking at 13 cards. Some highlights are Ashnod's Altar to sack some of the fairies, Thought Vessel is always good if you have blue and card draw, and Ebony Fly will get flying and give flying, which will get buffed by our commander, which is great. Moving on to card draw, we're looking at 12 cards. Some highlights are of course Rhystic Study being an enchantment and getting us a ton of cards, always good. Plus you finally get to ask that sweet, sweet question. Are you gonna pay the 1? And every time after that,
I'm gonna ask you one more time.
The Reality Chip is also a great guaranteed bonus card every turn, and it's an artifact, added bonus as well. Then there's Shorekai, artifact, late game beater, makes tokens, draws 2 cards, absolutely perfect in this deck. On the removal side of things, we've got 11 cards. We've got the classics like Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshare, but cards like Witness Protection and Frogify are great with our artifact and enchantment sub-theme. We run 4 board wipes in this deck. I normally run 3, but the reason we run 4 is because almost all of them will leave us with something. Martial Coup gives us 5+ tokens, Hour of Reckoning kills all non-tokens, and by invitation only has a chance to take out a few threats and leave our board fine. The 4th one is Cleansing Nova, and that's just a straightforward solution to problems on board. Speaking of board, how do we plan on filling the board? Well, obviously Alela produces a fair amount of tokens herself, but cards like Bitter Blossom, Sorin, and Feldar's Retreat quickly flood the board as well. But for all that board state, we need to protect ourselves from retaliation. Cards like Ghostly Prison and Pact Weapon stop people from swinging at us, while cards like Feldar's Retreat and Intangible Virtue give our board vigilance to leave us up for blockers. Now, of course, we could dissertate the negatives of what running too defensive a deck has on the public and large a metagame at hand, but I'm sorry, me don't exist. Now, how do we plan on buffing Alela herself? As I said before, Blackblade Reforged is probably one of the best ways. Nettle Cyst and All That Glitters will give her a solid +4/+4 as well every time, and that is just so good on a lifelink death touch flying. But for all that go tall, we also need protection. Cards like Teferi's Protection, Lightning Greaves, and Akroma's will keep Alela safe to swing another day. Now, I normally hate Deus Ex Machina cards that just come out of nowhere and they're like, hey, you win the game, but there's something about Akroma's will. It's like I know that stone wall is weaker than that steel wall, but that difference becomes indistinguishable when I have a fucking ray gun. Are you still listening to this analogy? Just go play the card. And then we've got these 3 random boys. I don't know. If you want to see the land base and go test the deck and see the entire list, the link is down below. Thanks, guys. Go play some Magic.